Today we're going to make a rainbow Mohican hoodie type thing to match our rainbow tutu. So you're going to need some scissors. I'm using fabric ones as always because they make life easy. Some thick thread and a needle that fits that thread in it. And a load of rainbow colored fabric, or whatever color theme you're going for. Oh, and a hoodie. You will also need a hoodie. So we're going to be attaching the Mohican along the center of the hood. And if you're lucky, your hood will have a seam in the middle that you can just follow along with. If not, you can just fold it in half and maybe give it an iron so that you have a really clear line that you can follow along. For the thread, I am doubling it up so that it's nice and thick because we're going to be attaching fabric to this and, we don't want it to snap because that would suck. Then we'd have a really lame Mohican. So I'm starting at the very front of the hood. You could start at the bottom if you prefer. I just prefer starting at the top. And to attach the thread, I'm starting on the inside of the hood going out. And then when I put the needle back through to the inside, I'm making the stitch about 1 centimeter wide. And I'm not pulling it all the way through. I'm leaving a loop of thread there because that's what we're going to attach the fabric to. Doing it this way is going to make it much quicker than trying to stitch on each piece of fabric individually, because we can attach multiple pieces to the same loop and it's just going to look much fuller and nicer. So before we can start attaching the fabric, we actually need to cut some fabric. So I'm starting with red, and this is like tutu fabric. It's called tulle or tulle. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. And before I cut the fabric, I am folding it 3 or 4 times to make it a much more manageable length of fabric to cut. And then I'm cutting strips that are about 1 inch wide. Then once you've got your strip, we're going to cut it down so that those strips are smaller. And I do these so they're just about a hand span, which I guess is maybe 6 inches or 5 inches. I couldn't find my ruler, so I couldn't measure it. So yeah, I was just using a hand span. But probably using your hand span is a good idea because, if you are a much bigger person than me, then you would probably want these to be bigger to match your hoodie. Otherwise, you'd end up with a really short Mohican. So when you're doing this, pay attention to how many pieces you end up with, how many of these cut strips of fabric, because then you can use it later on to figure out how many you're going to need to cut of every color. So now we've got some pieces, we're going to start to attach them. And this is the same as how we did it for the tutu, if you've seen that video. But we're taking a strip, folding it in half so that we end up with a loop at one end. And we're going to put that under the loop of thread that's going through our hood. And then thread the 2 ends back through that loop and pull it tight. So take the fabric, fold it in half so that you have a loop at one end. Thread the fabric loop under the thread loop. And then thread the 2 ends of the fabric through the loop in the fabric and pull it tight. And this is basically what you're going to do the whole way down the hood. You want to be quite careful when you're pulling the strips tight, when you're pulling that loop tight. You don't want to tug too hard on the fabric or the fabric's going to stretch and it loses that kind of bounciness. So I'm putting 4 strips of fabric onto every thread loop. But you could do more or less. It depends on what kind of effect you're going for. Just, try it out and see what works for you. So once I've got the 4 bits on, I'm pulling the thread tight from the other side and then making another loop with the thread. And you want to start it pretty close to the end of your first loop. And then, repeat the process. Attach your 4 strips or however many strips you're going to do. Pull the thread tight and start the next ones. So once I've attached that first batch of strips, that's when you can kind of start to calculate how many strips you're going to need, because it's much easier to just cut all of your strips in one go instead of having to keep stopping and starting to cut more strips. And because I'm doing 6 colors, I decided to grab some chalk and just mark out where exactly the sections are for each color so I can see how much more I need to fill in the red. And then from that I can figure out how much I need to fill in every other section. So once I've worked that out, I'm cutting all of the strips from the fabric at the same time, so I just have a nice huge pile of fabric to work from. And then attaching them all. And that's pretty much it. Just carry on doing that all the way down in your colors and yeah, until you hit the bottom. And be warned, this does actually take a really long time. I think this probably took me about 2 hours, and I mean, it probably took longer because I was filming, but still, expect it to be at least an hour and a half if you have, you know, my size head. So I stopped mine at the base of the hood where it met up with the seam. If you don't have a seam where the hood joins, then you could just match it up with the seams for the shoulders. Or just, you know, put it on and draw a small mark where you want to carry it onto, where you think it's going to look good, and use that as a mark. But I do think this would look quite cool if you did it all the way down the back, so you had more of like a kind of dinosaur spine going down the back. But, you know, that would probably take a really long time. So I hope you like it, guys, and this will be the perfect hoodie to wear with your rainbow tutu if you have made one of those. And yeah, I will see you next time. Bye, guys.